I don't know how to do this, except I've been told by my relatives, my friends, and co-workers to keep my mouth shut. But if you know me, that's exceedingly difficult. So far, you've heard nothing about this fantastical establishment. But you're all used to hearing the BS. You're used to hearing the talk about the famous. Well, you're listening to now someone who is infamous. And I came to work, as he said. I quit high school. That'll give you a hint. When I was 17, 10th grade. Walked in through the front gate. Nothing like this. No way. And I had the first, I'll excuse myself first, before I get into informing you about what this establishment is, what it's meant, and what it's done for so many. And you'll have to excuse me, I'm very old now. But one thing I don't forget is working for real legends. If I'm a legend, nobody's a legend. But Ken Anderson, I have to mention his name, was art director and one of the first few men, and I have to tell you, I'm an artist, and I mean this, I'm not, again, BSing. I'm a fantastic, fine artist. Don't pay any attention to that word, it means I'm original. I do what I want, how I want, and I never sold my soul. Not to Walt, not to Ken Anderson, not to Mark Davis, not to Milt Call, not to anybody. And I never would, although one. So I'm no different than you. I was 5 years in the slot shop, animation. None of you know what that is. You haven't the vaguest idea. And those who do, ignore it. You go from an in-betweener to a breakdown to a cleanup. If you're lucky, you're an assistant. And boy, don't you believe that there aren't great assistants. Walter Stanchfield, great assistant. There were many others. And I want to mention, from my point of view, from an artist who quit high school, comes to work for Disney, spends 5 years in the sweatshop, and finally gets an opportunity. Guess how? I'm talking to, I just will mention the name. Everybody's good, let's face it. Ken Peterson, personnel director. I'd gone up to do a job for Tom Kodrick, another great talent. You never hear his name. He asked me to do a motion picture illustration. I thought, oh boy, this is it. I go up, he wanted me to draw a woman at a sewing machine. I said, okay. Well, of course, he said, you know, Walt, I can't use it. I said, sure, of course I know. I'm not a realist. And I came down and Ken Peterson says, I don't know what I'm going to do with you. Now, if you're bored with it, you can clap me out or boo me out if you like. But this is real. There's no story made up. They're all absolutely fact. And Ken Peterson said, I don't know what I'm going to do with you. So you know what my thought was, oh boy, this is it. Well, guess who charges through the open door? I mean, charges. When I talked to him, I'd gone up to talk to him. He said, Walt, he didn't even turn around from his desk to look at me. He says, Walt, you'll never be a commercial artist. I said, and you'll never be a fine artist. That was Ivan. Well, it was Ivan who burst through the door at the personnel director's office and says, Ken, Walt can paint the backgrounds on Sleeping Beauty. I thought, well, that's good. I never have figured out yet why I did that, except I'll tell you the truth. What I thought was, He thinks I can't do it. Well, I painted more backgrounds on Sleeping Beauty than anybody else, and damn good, even better than Ivan. But then Ken Anderson and all these wonderful talents, and in a place like this where there's genius around every corner, you better believe to recognize an artist like myself, I even figured I had fat chance. But do you know, Ken Anderson was tops, and Ken loved Walt. He was such a gentleman. And Milt Call, a genius. I took first time we had a union here, we had a meeting of us lowly in-betweeners. I said, well, I'll take a petition around and ask those guys who make the big money that they won't strike. Well, one of the first I went to was Milt Call. You know what he said? He says, I've got mine, you get yours. I says, I'm sure glad I don't live next door to you. He says, why? I says, your house is on fire, I wouldn't piss on it. Oh, he says. He became my friend, a good friend. Years later, just before he retired, he called me down. They had called me back, I think out of a guilt conscience, made me head of the background department. Of course, it was all in just a figurative statement. I wasn't. But Milt calls me down. I want to show you something. And he showed me Picasso posters, original Picasso posters. My wife is French. I lived in France for 3 years. She just died. If I cried, don't feel bad.
Somebody start shooting.
But Milt then showed me a piece of animation and Sword in the Stone. Or was it? What was it? Another one. Excuse me. And it was Medusa taking off her lipstick, huh? Beautiful piece of animation. So I said, well, Milt, what are you going to do? Travel around with the picture and tell them you didn't do all the rest of that? You only did Medusa? He laughed. He was my friend. Can you imagine? I even he invited me to dinner with Ken Anderson, my wife, and Walt's niece. So you can tell, I've never once catered my opinion, as you can see now, which could even be worse. But there are so many, when they say a young person goes into, I walked off Buena Vista. I came all the way from Garvey. If there's anybody here in Southern California, you don't know where the hell it is. It's so far east, it's out of sight. It was Paupersville. My old man works for your great corporations today, Exxon. He asked him when we came down from San Francisco, he says, I'm telling you these things because it's who I am. Maybe not what you expect, but it's who I am. He would go into Los Angeles and he asked him, he says, will you give me a raise to buy a house? They said, no. You don't make enough money. Isn't that wonderful? I think that's real insensitivity.
Yeah, come on, Walt, that's good.
But it's pervasive in our society. Well, you'll never see my artwork because people have paid some goodly sums for it. I exhibited it, and none of you people, and some of you legends should know. Keita Roxby, huh? Bernie knows her. Wooly sure knowed her, knew her. But what the hell? All these people who worked in this establishment, which is buried, were all what I call the 20th century American, one of the world's greatest art forms at that time. animated the Last Supper, huh? And milk. My granddaughter.
You did it.
Leonard Maltin once wrote,